This video is a project of the Annenberg Foundation Trust at Sunnylands.
Why do you think the framers valued freedom of speech in our Constitution? They put it right in the very first amendment. And why do you think that was first and foremost?
It allows the citizens of America to put a check on their government, and it allows people to critique their government, and it also makes known public opinion.
All right, well, I'm not sure it serves as a check. It allows you to criticize, doesn't it, freely?
People back then were terrified of the monarchy that everyone escaped from in England. And when we had originally the Articles of Confederation, they totally failed. So when we rewrote the new Constitution, people saw that as an attempt to get back to monarchy, and everyone hated that idea. So James Madison and the others had to write the Bill of Rights, and they included free speech and all the rest in the First Amendment so that people would be assured that they would be able to criticize, criticize the government and not go back to that monarchy.
They wouldn't be able to be packed off to jail because they were critical of those in power, the government, as would have been the case perhaps under a different frame of government or the monarchy, which was being rejected.
Does the First Amendment apply just to political matters? We want Obama or McCain, we want Republican or Democrat?
No, it doesn't. It applies to all
What else
matters.
does it apply to?
It could apply to your personal beliefs on certain societal matters.
How about the fact that I like the Washington Redskins?
Well, that would
Is that covered by the First Amendment?
That could be. If you wanted to...
Or do you have any doubt about that?
Not at all. If you wanted to express the fact that you love the Washington Redskins, that's of course your right to say so. It's your right to
Is it
pray.
important for me to say that? Is it important for society to say that?
Yes, it's important.
Sports, for some people, are as important as politics, aren't they?
All forms of expression are important, especially in a democracy.
So what does that tell you about why we have speech?
Speech is important in our government because we are a democracy. Democracy, the actual word means a government ran by the people, run by the people.
But doesn't that slide back into the political justification that you gave, which is a very important justification, but we were saying that it applies to other subjects as well. Yeah. And then you said that was for our government, but don't let me talk you out of it.
Well, society altogether. Everyone in society has a right to express their ideas and speech in some way, form, or another.
I think it's especially vital because it's the way that we express ourselves. I think whether it's sports or politics or whatever you
Why
feel
is it
is
important that you have the right to express yourself?
Because it's who you are and it's who your personal belief is. And if we founded this country on the people and what the people want and how they choose and they make their decisions, I think it's vital to know what they want and what they make their priorities.
I think that's a very important answer. It's who you are. We define ourselves by what we say, by what we read, by what we think, by what we hear, by what we sing, by what we pray. This is who we are. This is our self-definition, and we define ourselves. The government does not define us.
It's also important because when you're exposed to different viewpoints, it helps you form your own viewpoints. And if you don't know what other people think, you're not informed, and if you're not informed, you can't make your own decisions.
Exactly. Now, what is speech? Do you think speech is only when we are speaking as I am right now, or can it be symbolic or some other kind of expression? Yes.
Speech can take many forms. It can be both verbal and nonverbal, and as you were saying, symbolic speech, because speech is just the expression of an idea. You can have the expression of an idea just by talking, or you can write it down, or you can wear a black armband, and that also represents an expression of an idea. So that's why symbolic speech is also speech, because even if it's not talking, you're still expressing an idea and an issue on something like that.
As in the Tinker case that came all the way to the US Supreme Court, and it involved students wearing black armbands during the conflict in Vietnam to express a viewpoint they had. And the court ended up supporting that and saying, yes, even though the school didn't like it, the students could wear an armband.
Let's think of the worst possible racist, disgusting, terrible, troublemaking, awful things you can think of. What about Hitler, for example, or worse? And there probably are worse.
If they can limit one person's rights, even if that person supports something that most of society doesn't believe in, then they can move on to limit other people's rights. So the poem, first they came for the socialists, but I wasn't a socialist. And eventually they keep on knocking people down, and you're finally left where your rights are being taken away. So,
all right, well, they have statutes in some European countries that say, I'll give you two. First is, you cannot make racist remarks where the racist remark is likely to stir up racial hatred. Second, you cannot deny the Holocaust. You know what I'm talking about. Okay? Now, those are two statutes in countries that believe in free speech, but they have those statutes. What's your view? Yeah.
The horrors of the Holocaust were so atrocious, especially in those European countries. During World War II, those countries were destroyed and demolished.
Yes, they were destroyed and demolished. So you think that's a good idea, that statute?
Cities were razed to the ground. What I'm saying is that because
well, I mean, do you think it's a good idea, or do you think it's not a good idea?
It could put people in immediate danger. If your speech puts someone in immediate danger, then it should be limited.
So, in your view, you should be able to have a statute that says you cannot deny that the Holocaust happened.
If it puts you in immediate danger.
If you ask someone, why do you have it, he recounts pretty much what you said.
I think that it's important for anyone to be able to express any view that doesn't show a clear and present danger, and I don't think that denying the Holocaust does that. Now, I've often struggled with the American legal system not disallowing neo-Nazism and such hateful type of groups, but as a Jewish American, it's very difficult for me, but I've often thought of it in the terms that if we didn't know that that existed, if we weren't aware of the neo-Nazi problem, as I see it, then we wouldn't have a counter movement and we wouldn't be aware and be more aware of that.
We're removed from that, but let's take really a tough one right now. What about the statutes that exist in Canada, I think, and other places say you cannot make seriously racially bigoted remarks showing hatred of a racial minority. What do you think of that?
I think that that's part of free speech and that it should be protected because if you can't show hatred of a certain group, then maybe that will be furthered to mean you can't show hatred of the government, you can't show hatred of this and that will seriously impinge your rights.
So you say you have to draw a line, you have to stick to the line. The line has to be that free speech is there not for people we like and not for people who have popular views. It's there for people we hate. It's there for the ones who are the most bigoted, terrible, awful people we can think of. And it's there for them because if it isn't there for them, maybe someday it wouldn't be there for us. That's the argument. Well, that's the argument we pretty much accepted here.
How about burning the American flag as a form of protest for what we're doing? Yes.
That falls under symbolic speech because burning the flag itself is, an expression of a view. Maybe you really dislike the government, and that's still protected speech because you're allowed to express your views on the government freely. And so burning the flag itself is not an illegal or act or and it's
I guess there was a
protected
case that came all the way to this court dealing with that, wasn't there? But it's kind of a big stumbling block to get over. And many countries do prohibit the burning of that nation's flag, as you probably know.
I'll tell you a story about the flag burning case. After I wrote a short opinion in that case, agreeing that that's symbolic speech and that it's protected. and I was in California to visit my two boys who were there at the time, and we ate breakfast together, and somebody came over and they said, "Are you Justice Kennedy?" I thought, this guy watches C-SPAN late at night. And he said, "I want to talk to you about your flag burning case." I said, "Okay, I'll listen." He said, "I'm a lawyer in Ukiah, California, which is way up in northern California, small town. And I live there because my father lives there. I lost my mother years ago. But I wanted to be close to my dad. I'm an attorney. He never comes into the office. When the San Francisco Chronicle reported the flag burning case, he came running into my office with a lot of people there. He said, "You should be ashamed to be an attorney." He said, "There's a reason he said that. He was a prisoner of war in Germany. They used to collect little bits of cloth, red, white, and blue cloth, and make a little flag, the prisoners. The German guards would find it, would beat them up, take away the flag, and they'd make another one the next day." And this, my father, who'd been in this prison camp, said, "You should be ashamed to be an attorney with a legal system that doesn't protect the flag." He said, "I gave him a copy of your opinion," which is short. And he said he came back the next day. He said, "You can be proud to be an attorney." He thought about it. He realized that he was fighting for something. And what he was fighting for was the right to have your own thoughts, to reach your own conclusions, to protest, to change your mind. And he changed his mind.
Now, what about free speech in schools, in public schools, where you're under the age of 18? You're not an adult, and the schools are serving in the place, in a way, of your parents as the authorities that govern your behavior while you're in their care at school. Now, what limits are there as to what schools can tell you to do or not to do in the area of your own free speech rights? Can schools control that, do you think, and should they? Right here.
Well, schools are non-public forums, therefore they don't have to hold up the First Amendment to the same degree as public forums do. So sometimes students may have a lower level of the First Amendment applied to them in school than they would outside of school.
Does the fact that students are under the age of 18 weigh in that decision as well? Yes.
No, the age doesn't really matter. It's actually because you're in the school and you're in a government building which is taking the place of the parent is because your speech can be limited.
So if we have in the Army, let's suppose we're all in the Army, as I once was. It was rather interesting. I'm glad I was. And so I don't like the instructor, in fact. He made me get up at 5 in the morning, and then I have to run for quite a while. It wasn't all that pleasant. And so I'm going to get even, and I write a piece of paper here which says what a real jerk I think he is, and I circulate to people who think it's very funny because I put it in this very entertaining way. Do you think that he can discipline me?
I think he can, only because it's the military, and I think that in places like the military or prisons, the place in which you're in can...
Or schools.
Or schools.
Yeah.
These are places like our government institutions, and they can restrict your speech.
Suppose it's not the military.
Well, if it's like, say, a public park or something, you're just distributing on the street, then it would be fine because the place is in the public realm.
But I was just thinking, I have a locker in this building where I keep my gym clothes, and suppose I discovered all my colleagues searching my locker, they wouldn't do that. But nonetheless, I mean, probably I have some right to privacy in the locker.
In the locker? Sure.
Yeah. You think, what about the 3-year-old?
I think in terms of like criticizing like...
The 3-year-old's locker.
Oh, the 3-year-old's locker?
Yeah, at the daycare center.
I think the 3-year-old would also have rights of privacy. I mean,
You think?
I think so, because I think...
I'm mixed up. We have a 3-year-old with a locker in the Army. I'm getting mixed up.
All right, go ahead.
But there was a point I wanted to note for the record. We let it go by. I think it was the gentleman in front indicated that you didn't think there's a difference between being under 18 years and over. Do you think high school students have the same rights of speech as college students? Junior high school students the same as?
Yes, you.
No, because we're underage and we're in a government-funded building while colleges are more privately funded, we don't have the same rights to speech as opposed to in college where their speech is very unlimited. They can say almost anything they want to say.
Well, does it
Well,
have
I'll think
something to
about
do
that.
with age, do you suppose?
I think it does. I think they suspect
Yes.
that at a certain age you become viable to express your freedom of speech, though I don't think that way at all.
All right, now.
I want to mark that place for the record. I'd like to talk about that more. I'm not,
Okay.
just because I'm quiet doesn't mean I agree. Yeah.
Do you think it changes if what you're saying in college is against what the college is trying to, the message that the college is trying to give out? If the college has an anti-alcohol policy, they're not going to allow you to, drink or do what you want because that's against their policy. So even if, it doesn't matter if you're in a public-funded school or in college, you still can't do everything that you want to do.
Well, could you, as a college student, have a prohibition, have a protest saying college students should be able to drink at 18?
They could have a protest because you're allowed to have a protest, but it doesn't mean that you're actually drinking at this protest. As long as you say you want to be able to drink, that's perfectly fine. That's your freedom of speech to be able to say that you want to do this, as long as you don't actually break the rules.
Do you think a college campus should have the same or more generous rights of protest than a junior high school?
I think that, I guess it could be more generous because you're over the age of 18 and you have to be, no one's responsible for you anymore. Your parents aren't there. The college can't actually be your parent or represent you like as a parent would. So I think it is different.
What age do people get to vote? At 18, you're considered an adult for voting purposes. That probably makes a difference, don't you suppose? In your rights of free speech, I would imagine maybe so. There's a hand back there.
I believe that if you can die for your country at the age of 18, like I've seen some soldiers in Iraq, I think that means society recognizes 18 as a turning point in which your views carry more weight. And thus, I believe that college has a wider range of free speech than like a high school would, simply because 18 is like a cutoff for society, and society recognizes you're a different individual when you're 18 than you are when you're 17. That's according to society.
I suspect you're right.
We have a group of students, and they think it's a very funny joke to meet in the house of one of them after school, decide what was the worst thing any of their teachers said that day, and then make up a whole newspaper all about that thing in which they think is some lot of very funny insults and very rude and not very nice language either, and they circulate it around to all their friends who think this is all quite funny. Now the school wants to discipline them for doing that. Can it do it? And does it matter if the age of the students is 7 or 28?
In high school, the high school serves as local parentes. So they do have, they act as your parent over the course that you're under their care. However, in college, you serve as an individual and as an adult, so you are given full rights as the amendment grants as a full citizen of the United States.
But I see it as you were born with that right, and everybody has the same and equal right, seen as how it is in the First Amendment, and it is highly important. And in a democratic society, you should be able to say what you want. I think the age does not matter, because even if you're in junior high and you're in college, you all have something to say.
Well, now let's look at the case law here. Do we think the Supreme Court has some voice in that?
Of course. I mean,
yes. And did you look at all at the Morse versus Frederick decision?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in that case, did the court uphold the action of the principal in suspending a student for putting up a banner supporting use of drugs?
Yes. I think it's more of like what you say and in the time, in the manner of what you say it. promoting drugs at
But
any
didn't the
age is
court rely
inappropriate.
on the fact that, look, this is a high school and the school can discipline a student that advocates drug use while in the school?
Yes, I think it was more of not according to his age, but what he said and the fact that he was promoting drug use, not exactly his age.
Well, you can't say, can you, that under the case law of this court that a high school student has totally free reign to say whatever the student wants in certain areas.
See, you're just at the stage where you're the victim of all of the efforts to treat younger people differently, because you're saying, why should I be treated differently? So with your imagination, imagine that you're talking, you now are 10 years more, and you have these little children wandering around, and these children are saying things you don't want them to say, and you want to pick them up by the scruff of the neck and say, my little friend, we don't talk that way around here. And suddenly you will see there's more to be said for control of children than you think at the moment. Unless, of course, it is your grandchild, in which case he can do no wrong.
It all goes back as far as freedom of speech, especially in schools and in colleges. I think it roots back to the amount of disruption it causes and the amount of, if you are protesting or if you are holding up a sign in the middle of class, as opposed to being part of a club that maybe is, for a certain religion or for a certain sexual preference or something like that, and you hold a rally somewhere else. I think it really is a matter of that schools are institutions that are set there for our educational purposes, and if you are, I guess, infringing upon what their job is, then that is where it really comes into play.
I want to know what you think of the concept that if the student is saying, look, we know that use of marijuana is prohibited in this state, but we think the law should be changed. Now, is that okay in the high school? Do you think the high school can prohibit that kind of speech?
Important to look at the difference between having the school's authority over the students and then also the safety of the students and the message that is being promoted.
Well, the example I gave, can the school tell the student that the student cannot say on a banner, we hope the state will allow the use of marijuana, not make it illegal? Do you think that this court would have held the same way in the Morse case if that had been on the banner, instead of saying, here, what was it, Bong for Jesus or something?
I think that the ruling would have been the other way had Frederick's sign read legalize marijuana or something to that effect, because the majority in the ruling stated that the sign was not allowable because it was advocating illegal drug use, and if Frederick had been advocating legal drug use, then I don't think there would have been a problem because it's more of a political statement.
One of the cases you should look at, and there are two cases, are the high school commencement speeches. You're the commencement speaker because you had the best grades or you won the contest. May you then say what you like, and we have some very interesting cases on that, and they're difficult cases that you might look at. Lee versus Wiseman is one that occurs to me.
I was just wondering if I could ask a clarifying question about your earlier proposal about the newspaper and the students writing the offensive newspaper. You said that the students would make the newspaper at a student's house, and they would pass it out to their friends. Would they pass it out to their friends in school, or
Nope.
just? So they would just pass it out to their other friends at their homes. And you were asking whether or not the school could stop them?
Yeah. School thinks it's a bad idea for education to have the students meet in their houses and pass out a newspaper that criticizes all the teachers in very rude, explicitly awful, slangy, well, we all understand. Okay, so they say this is part of our discipline. And what I want to show you is maybe age matters there. Maybe it matters. And I don't know the answer to that, but the reason, look at what we've been doing in the last half hour or so. You're getting a little insight into our job as judges. We start with a principle. And the principle is one we can pretty much agree on. The Constitution says Congress shall not abridge the freedom of speech. That means all government, not just Congress. But it doesn't say what the freedom of speech is, does it? So that's left to people to work out. Now, we started with what I think is the easiest principle, because it's the most widely accepted. That the worst thing you can do by way of abridgment is stop somebody from talking because you don't like what he says. Now, that's called his viewpoint, or it's called the content or the expression or the point of view. Now, it's easiest to say, well, certainly that's protected. But even there you can find some borderline cases. And now we begin to move away from that and say, does it matter if he's in the Army? Does it matter if he's in high school? Does it matter if he's in grammar school? Does it matter what the subject is? Does it matter when it's said? Does it matter why it's said? Does it matter? Does it matter? Does it matter? And these are not just asked, which we were doing, to make it difficult for you. They were asked because that's what happens in a court that's concerned with free speech. We get one variation after another, and we have to decide what the principles are in these very different circumstances. And that isn't so easy, because the only thing we all agree upon is whatever the principle is in this case, it's going to be the same for all similar cases.
Well, I think we have seen in, at least at this court, that it does matter if the speech is occurring in a public school or a school where children are under the age of becoming an adult, under 18, and that the school does act as substitute parental authority, in effect, while a child is in school, and the school can set certain parameters of behavior for the students that include speech. I think we have seen the court acknowledge something to that effect. But at the same time, there are different circumstances. And if all the student is saying is, I think the legislature in this state should legalize marijuana, we didn't have that case here, but I suspect the result might be different than a student saying, now everybody go out and smoke marijuana. We know it's illegal, but you ought to do it. See, two different things, aren't they? And the court has recognized that, and probably properly so. The example that is often given is that even for an adult, it's okay to prohibit people from yelling fire in a crowded theater when it isn't true, just to stimulate everybody panicking and trying to get out. That can be prohibited. It's not a form of protected speech, in other words. So there are some limits, and the question for the courts always is, where do we find those limits, and how do we define the boundaries?